Happy Friday, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Actionable Innovations. My name is Lucy Gray, and we're happy to have you here. If you're watching us from various platforms, we'd love for you to say hello in the comments and tell us where you're from today. If you are watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment there and we'll see it. We also will see it if you're in Hopin. It may be a little tricky if you're in LinkedIn Live because LinkedIn is not quite as conversant with StreamYard as the other two platforms. But we would love for you to say hello and let us know that you're here so that we can connect with you. We also want this to be a networking event. So if you want to share any of your initiatives or your LinkedIn profile or anything like that during the broadcast, you can and connect with each other. So we hope that will happen. We are a small group of educators who occasionally gather to explore innovative topics in education. Our community is called Actionable Innovations Global, and we have a website where others can share their initiatives and events. We believe that together we can do more in education, and we especially need to come together in light of the pandemic, whether it's waning or not. And we are also working on some upcoming professional learning events for people. Three things are of interest to us. In addition to our Global Learning for an Open World Conference, which we hold in November, we are thinking about doing a summit for consultants in education and a couple other events. And so later on, we're going to put up a link to a survey. If you're interested in virtual professional development, we would love for you to take the survey and give us some feedback as we plan those events. So more about that later. But that's a little bit about us. We'd love for you to get involved, and you can find our community at actionableinnovations.global. Welcome, Janice. We see you in the chat from Dallas. That's great. You can follow us using the link here for Linktree. We have a Medium publication. We're on Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group as well. Or you can scan that QR code as well and follow all those wonderful resources. Here's the survey that I mentioned earlier. I'll put this in the chat as well. But if you go to bit.ly/AI Global Future Events, you will find it as well. I already said this, so I'm going to skip it. And I want to welcome Brian Morello with us who's joining us today. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Lucy.
It's good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So everyone, I am an alum of Beloit College in Wisconsin, which is about 2 hours from where I live in Chicago. And I serve on the alumni board. And I think Beloit is doing some really incredible things in terms of innovation in general. And it's also a place that means a lot to me personally because I grew up at this college. It really was the impetus for everything that's come after Beloit. And I've had the opportunity to visit Beloit and meet Brian, who was graduated the year he was a senior when I was a freshman. And so I invited Brian here to tell the story of this entrepreneurial center that he runs at Beloit and tell us a little bit about his journey. So before we get started, though, you can follow Brian. His LinkedIn and Twitter are there in the slides. But before we get started, Don, my partner in crime, has a few questions that we use to kind of break the ice during these conversations. So Don, do you want to pick one of your favorite questions and fly Brian with it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Buckley. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm the co-host of this show with Lucy. So if any of you are Vanity Fair readers, you might be familiar with the Proust questionnaire, which sits on the very last page. And so that questionnaire was actually written by Marcel Proust. And sometimes it's used by interviewers today. It was sort of like he answered questions in the form of a confession book / album, and it was really popular parlor game in Victorian times. So I've just taken it and sort of adapted it for educators. So let's start, Brian. And there's no right or wrong answers. What educator do you most identify with?
Well, my mentor was a Beloit College professor named Jerry Gustafson. So I've modeled a lot of my work after him.
Right. Okay. What words or phrases do you most overuse?
Well, I'm trying to get rid of another kick at the cat. That tends to come in a lot, and would like to disabuse myself of that one.
Wow, I don't know that one.
Yeah.
That's a creative one, at least. I mean, I use the same things. I say awesome all the time, which drives I need to stop. But kick the cat at least is more creative.
Yeah, and mine is amplify. So if out there in the world, in the virtual world, if you want to answer, please do so along with us. So what is your most overused word? Let's see. Let me pull. Treasured possession.
Well, I'm here in Beloit, Wisconsin, and right up the road was the Parker Pen Company for years and years. So I have kind of a Art Deco Parker pen that I've had for 30 years that I love, and it's kind of a affordable luxury. So I like the pen.
Is the company still in existence?
Yeah, it's owned by another company that owns a bunch of kind of fine writing instrument brands like Waterford or Watermark or whatever it is, and a few others. So,
my mother had a beau in college that worked for Parker Pens. I remember that. But I didn't realize they were in Janesville. Okay.
Yeah, corporate headquarters in Janesville.
Yeah, I remember Parker Pens, Brian. I grew up with them in Ireland, and they were this, really popular, prestigious pen that you often got at a birthday or special occasion. There's a whole variant of them, and so you've just brought me right back to when we use them, and particularly in school then, because then you fill them with ink and then you get the ink stains in your hand. But wow, I totally forgotten about them. But yeah, that's awesome. Last one. Who are your heroes in real life?
You sent me these things in advance, so I took a look, and gosh, I was thinking of like McMurphy and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was one where, he kind of created his own life inside that institution. That was always sort of a heroic character for me. But I try not to get too bogged down in that, as imperfect as people are. I mean, they do heroic things, but I don't like to put people on too big a pedestal. It's hard to match up to that.
Yeah. Anyone out there? Is there anything in the chat?
It's not too busy right now, but who's your hero, Don?
Well, mine is Michael Collins, one of the great fighters that got Ireland its independence in the 1920s. And there's an amazing movie about him, but I think it's Neil Jordan directed, and great arts director. So it has to be Michael Collins.
All right. I think it changes every time that we do these conversations for me. But I agree about putting people on pedestals. Like, I think everybody's human. But there's certain kinds of people that I find really interesting and inspirational, and I would love to be more like them. Like, I don't know, Diane Keaton. I would love to be like Diane Keaton in my life, or I don't know. But in terms of real life people, I was thinking today, I had a meeting with a group called the Charter for Compassion, which is a nonprofit that started out of a TED Prize winner's wish. Karen Armstrong, she's I think a religious scholar in the UK. And this group is now run by, this is the Beloit connection here. by the woman who ran my student teaching program. So I did the ACM Urban Education Program, which no longer exists, and spent a semester down in Chicago doing my student teaching. And this woman, Marilyn, and her partner ran this program. And I've stayed in touch with her, not all that time, but more recently. And she now is the executive director of this group. And it's bringing schools and people together who believe in a compassionate world, and that, you know, that's the way to finding and promoting peace and justice, I guess is the way I would put it. So we had a meeting this morning to talk about how we can all network and support each other's work. And there were people from 5 different continents, and people who were really kind of living what I would call a balanced life. Like they were, a couple of them were doing mindfulness work in Ireland, Don. And anyway, so like people like that who've lived in here, and Maryland's got to be close to 80, you know, I'm guessing, and leading this really rich, rewarding, purposeful life. So that's a hero to me. Just adding my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a fun exercise. I remember that James Lipton used to have Inside the Actor Studio, and I used to love that little bit at the end where he'd ask the questions and see what people would respond.
Yeah. Have you seen, by the way, speaking of that, I just saw the documentary with Paul Newman, about Paul Newman, The Last Movie Stars, and there's a little bit of the actor studio stuff in there. I highly recommend it if anybody hasn't seen it yet. It's about Paul Newman and his wife. It's awesome.
I was thinking that Lucas Jackson, Cool Hand Luke, was a kind of a cool character too that Paul Newman played.
Yeah. Should we do one final one?
Sure.
So, who is your favorite hero of fiction, Brian?
Well, I think you know, the one when I had this story was the McMurphy character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. How he I use him in class as a entrepreneurial character, in that you know, he sets his own goals, finds his own resources, creates his own fun, and you know, does sort of an inside out approach to life where he doesn't let the you know, outside world dictate, you know, his activities or happiness in a lot of ways. So I like people that can you know, set their own goals, build skills, put their energy into those, and kind of do internal motivation. So I get a kick out of characters like that.
Wow. Mine is Batman.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Again, I grew up on him as a kid in the southwest of Ireland. So my Parker pens and my Batman.
Yeah, right.
My hero, or not, we're not hero, fictional character. I every time I say Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables, which would probably mean nothing to you guys because it's kind of a book that girls have read growing up, but kind of a fearless teacher who's creative with an imagination. Anyway, so Don, I'm going to let you take over the conversation with Brian a little bit. But I thought we'd start, I'm going to take the slides away here. And I thought we'd start first with Brian. Give us a little, an idea of what the CELEB Center is about and how you, or the history behind it. How did you come to be part of this center that was inspired by Jerry Gustafson?
Well, I'm here in Beloit, Wisconsin, which is about an hour from Chicago, and Milwaukee, just south of Madison, which is a small, select liberal arts college, the oldest college in Wisconsin, actually. And back in the mid-'80s, when I was here, Jerry Gustafson, who was an economics professor, stumbled onto the burgeoning domain of entrepreneurship education, started teaching classes, using it as a metaphor for the liberal arts, and became kind of a pioneer in the field. By 2003, he had amassed enough following and got some resources together to buy 2 dilapidated old buildings downtown Beloit and combine them into a storefront and floors above into a center. And I came in to succeed him upon his retirement in 2011. So, and have done a phase 2 remodel to it. And basically, we're getting ready this fall to celebrate our 20th anniversary. So I'm here teaching and directing the center, and our basic idea is to provide space, mentorship, and even funding for students to kind of figure out their own goals and ambitions, and through student-led ventures and help them achieve those. And the unique secret sauce of this place is that it's debunks the idea that a lot of students come into it with entrepreneurship being only tech. And we do a lot of things in the arts, visual arts, music, media, prototyping, as well as just software engineering. So there's something for everyone here, and we try to have a professional but comfortable atmosphere and provide resources that a student couldn't afford or maybe wouldn't have room for in their personal lives. So that's what we're doing. It's very different and large compared to what most of our peers have, and it's really been an exciting experience for me and soft landing after having been 25 years in the beer industry as a distributor and a brewer prior to coming here.
One of the things I seem to recall when I was a student at Beloit back in 1988, it seemed like entrepreneurship was the domain of econ students. It was Bellmark was kind of the roots of this, I'm assuming. And it never occurred to me that entrepreneurship would be something that I would be interested in 30 years later. And so I think it's so interesting how this has evolved from being just for a select group of students into something that is supporting the liberal arts, what liberal arts are about. So Bellmark happened, and then how did everything else kind of take root around that? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone with that characterization. I think a lot of people feel like that entrepreneurship requires some secret handshake and it's only for a certain few. And this place, definitely opposes that and tries to, figure that out. In fact, we're so excited for a lot of things to happen here because we drive it through the arts. And, to me, the arts are, at least a close cousin to the entrepreneur, because you're finding resources, coming up with ideas, new things, and figuring out a way to make them come to life. And, that's what's so exciting about it, that the mindset of the entrepreneur can benefit anybody, even if they don't start a venture. So this Bellmark Associates that you refer to as a market research company that I advise here, where students take on real projects with firms, that came out of the econ department from another professor who had been here in parallel with Gustafson. But Gustafson was more along the lines of the entrepreneur and creating an environment where you could lead a fulfilling life by having achievements of your own making and figuring out what was important to you. And, that became more and more germane as these very loving families produced these students that were coming to us who had never played till the streetlights came on and always had an AAU coach or a music teacher or somebody who was giving them assignments, and they became very competent at cracking those out. But the problem is that, when you get out into life, and if you really want to have a happy life, you want to create your own goals and attack those. And that's exciting, but it's also terrifying for people who have just become people who do assignments and are always given those. So we spend a lot of time kind of not losing the good things that came from their background, but also giving them permission to try new things and figure out what their life should be about and finding their why, if you want to say it that way.
Let me ask one more question, and then I'll let Don get into the entrepreneurial piece of this. What does the building itself look like? Can you give the audience a little bit of a background of the transformation that's happened in Beloit and how your building has been a part of that? Because I think that's also, the physical space is just really amazing. And I think it's important for people to know about that.
Well, Beloit, Wisconsin is a city of 35,000 people, and it's come to be the most exciting small town in America. We have our own homegrown billionaire. Diane Hendricks has a roofing supply company that was started in 1982, and her net worth is $12 billion at this point, the wealthiest self-made woman in America. She lives here and has done a lot of her philanthropy here, teaches in my class. We also have several other multi-billion-dollar revenue companies. So for a small town, that's extremely unusual. That coupled with Beloit College, which is a 175-year-old liberal arts college, which has students come here from all over the world, adds a vitality and vibrance that you don't see in most small towns. And then the third leg of our stool is we have professional sports. I was part of a group that just built a $40 million professional baseball park. We're the affiliate, single A affiliate of the Miami Marlins. So there's just a lot going on here. It's very exciting. It's a very diverse population with 20% Latino, 20% African American. So we have a lot of the identity of a large urban area with the composition of our population. And through that, the downtown's been revitalized with all sorts of urban development and housing and very nice restaurants, 2 boutique hotels. And we've been a part of that. So we sit right on the main drag in a 18,000 square foot facility that is the combination of 200-year plus old buildings. And we have a storefront right on Main Street that is called Gallery ABBA. ABBA is not the Swedish rock band, but an acronym for the art of business and the business of art. So each semester we have a student become the acting owner and take on this retail space and run a brick and mortar business of an art gallery and find art from students, alumni, or faculty and produce shows and have the wine and cheese parties and have an Etsy kind of store and learn how to do a business and take their love of making and extend that into commercial atmosphere. And then behind that, we have a recording studio where students can learn how to do recording engineering, music technology, and then produce music onto their SoundCloud. It seems to be a soft landing place for a lot of students of color who tend to gravitate to this hip hop and rap genre and make beats, and all of a sudden get some interest in sound. And then we recommend a physics class and leads to all sorts of interesting things. There's a access television station that we have under contract that we run for the city. So we are able to teach media studies classes, and students can get in there and produce their own content. And since there's only 7 people that watch an access television station, they can take all kinds of risks because there's no boom go the dynamite moment that will live in infamy on the internet. And we have a venture lab upstairs and a nice little bougie blue couch they can hang on, kitchenette. And then upstairs we have a classroom, a fully equipped maker lab that is the envy of even bigger schools. And we've just also launched a esports club up there with a sim racing kit that they're going to start doing. So there's just all sorts of different ways to access the place. And, I encourage anybody who's interested. There's a lot of pictures and descriptions and ideas at beloit.edu/celeb, like a celebrity, CELEB.
Don, are you pondering all this?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. So what you said, Lucy, about where did this start? So I guess when I was growing up, I associated entrepreneurship with finance, and that's sort of where it sat, and it just didn't interest me. But I started my first business when I was at Imperial College in London, and while I was there doing a doctorate, I was tutoring for to make ends meet. And I would go through agencies that I saw where, they would find me the work and then they would take a cut. And so I contacted a friend of mine in Dublin and said, hey, we should start a tutoring agency. And she said, yes. So I took their business model and we built out a tutoring industry in Dublin because she had a source of getting teachers. And of course, one, I was working remotely. This is back in the 80s, which now we see, because the agency was set in Dublin and I was at Imperial College London. And and I didn't even think of that myself as an entrepreneur. I had no idea. To me, I was just making some money. And I guess it never really struck me what entrepreneurship was till I started to work in the design industry and then sort of learning about design thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, this is about idea generation. As I always say to the students, would someone desire that? If there's not a desirability factor, then let's not try and make it. And that's often, as you know, the mistake of entrepreneurs: jump to the feasibility step. But who wants that? But Brian, do you find you have students that come in that already have done entrepreneurship in high school?
Yeah, there are some that have, done arbitrage and traded sneakers, or, done some lawn care, things like that. Some may have had some exposure in high school to some innovation or entrepreneurship principles and maybe, start the t-shirt business, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But most don't. And that's fine. And really the magic is to just get them to consider things small, simple, and fast, because they have so many other things they should be doing in school, but to get them coming up with their own ideas, setting their own goals, and building skills around those to get them done. And that's where it really starts to happen. And unlike many schools, I am absolutely uninterested in the vanity metrics of, things that get commercialized or tech transfer that happens, because that's just not an appropriate or doable thing for most college students. And I'm really more interested in getting to the students who didn't think they could be an entrepreneur or didn't have a sense for it. And in some ways, it's interesting too, that the ones that are really off and running, ironically, I tend not to even meet them. They don't even feel like they need me, and they just go off and are doing their things anyway. And even sometimes don't even come back to school. They just keep going. So I'm more interested in people and bringing it to light for people who don't think they're a part of it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, because like what you said earlier is that, like, it's not even if you become an entrepreneur, it's just that mindset that can be used in many other ways in any sort of decision making, and that's the way I see it as well. And when I teach it, it's very method driven. So they're real methods that are used in industry. And I, tell the students this. So you probably know this method that I just started with my second semester class, called the Lightning Decision Jam. Basically it's like you try and see if it's worth solving a problem or not. And of course, first of all, I ask them what works, because, I don't want them just get into the negative phase, and then what doesn't work. But anyway, what triggered out of this, what I thought was one lesson has now turned into lesson 4, is homework. And like, they've gone on to how might we questions and coming up with ideas. So they've started their ideation phase, and now they're taking those ideas and headlining them. And then we're going to see, well, which one is pursuing what. And already the head of the upper school has got wind of it. And so now she's going to come down, and let's see if we can get something happening. But even that, like, as a process, has turned into something useful for them. Like, they're just reimagining their homework, which is a big problem, because it's way too much homework. And we know it doesn't stick. And most of the research shows that it's not really great for learning. But like again, if it's 1% of them ever goes into business, it's fine with me. But I'm just trying to get them to think creatively, which I think is something that I never really thought about as an entrepreneur till I was introduced to the world of design thinking. And I was like, oh my God, wow, it's there. So really, I think it's about habits, which you probably find with your students. Can they design these entrepreneurial habits to actually, they can apply to all areas of their life?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the inclination is run right to the features and especially the engineering types just want to build things. But, as we all know, it starts with the customer. And is there a gap in the marketplace that needs something like that? One of the exercises we do is it's called Tale of the 20s, where I gift the students $20 a piece And then over the course of the semester, they need to double it 3 times, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 40 to 80, 80 to 160. And they need to do something that's legal and wouldn't embarrass their mothers if it got on the front page of a newspaper, but otherwise get out there and make something happen, and put their identities on the line to sell something, which is, tends to be a big step for people that, it's intimidating to ask other people if they find value in what you're offering enough to actually pay for it. And we even do things like they can't shroud it in philanthropy or let people know that they were going to give the money away or something. They have to actually want the money, keep the money, realize there's nothing nefarious in being profitable, and they go out there and do these things, whether it's and try to do it in a way that's not just using their labor, but that creates something that, maybe could have some scale to it or something. And that tends to be a great laboratory kind of experiment where they get out there and figure out on a small scale, can they come up with an idea, make a prototype, get some marketing out there, find the customer and take it across the finish line.
Right. And Brian, as well, it is interesting how when you mention entrepreneurship, people go straight to tech as well, and it tends to be, veiled in tech. And in fact, I've designed a bunch of entrepreneurship electives for schools, and they sit in the tech department because they don't know where else to put them. It's a tech entrepreneurship. And the reason I asked about do you get students in, because in the independent school world where I work, it's become very popular to have entrepreneurship electives. And I've co-designed a bunch of them for different schools with teachers that are interested in doing that. And that was the background of that question. But I think maybe you may see more and more that are sort of doing it at the high school level in the future when it becomes more prevalent, I think, in this country.
That's my question. Is I'm wondering how prevalent are entrepreneurial programs, in high schools that would feed into this. But obviously a kid doesn't need to have that background necessarily to be in your programs, Brian. But I'm just wondering, Donna and Brian, are you seeing any feeder programs or anything like rising other in regular public schools, as opposed to, independent schools have always been kind of on the cutting edge in terms of what they're offering. But I'm wondering, is there a movement? Is there an association? Is there some place that people that's kind of aggregating entrepreneurial thinking, other than, I don't know, what's that one old business group that used to do this kind of stuff?
AOCA or IOCA.
I'm blanking on it right now. It was big when I was a kid.
Junior Achievement used to do some things, and then there was a guy out of Harlem 25 years ago that created a thing called Nifty. That was an entrepreneurship kind of program. But now I think it's fairly ubiquitous. I'm seeing students' transcripts that have entrepreneurship courses and different co-curricular kind of activities that they tell me about, that, where they created a product or did something. So I think it's out there a lot. And, I don't necessarily, a lot of times it will live in a tech environment, or at least a maker space, because then they can prototype, which is fine. But in order to really have a larger tent, I think it's totally unnecessary to restrict it to that, and realize that, with the tools that are out there, entrepreneurship has been so democratized that, anyone can have a side hustle or a gig and start to, produce things and enjoy the excitement of having produced something and sell it. And, that's a big thing we work on here. And even in our financial literacy program, is just to help people, realize, that our society is so driven toward consumption, and that, that's equated to, happiness and enjoyment. When, taking a hike and tapping maple syrup, and then, processing it and giving it to friends as Christmas gifts can be, a lot of fun and great. And you actually, save money by giving gifts, and you're not consuming and, thinking that's the only way to behave. So I think when you start to get that mindset and mentality going, a lot of great things happen out of it. And sometimes that can be a venture, but it's in many ways, this place is just a resource and a tool to get people, having a different frame to see things through.
Yeah. So you know what, Brian, with the teens that I work with, I find them very environmentally conscious. You know what I mean? They're so up on this stuff, and if it has something to do with clothes, it's always recycled because I need to think of the environment. They're very, very keyed into all of this, and not into the, if it's clothes, they're not into the fast fashion thing. They're like, no. But I get a lot of recycling and how can we do this, like without polluting and what have you. And it's like, it's inspiring, that's what they're thinking.
So can I ask what the difference is between, or Brian, do you guys talk about this all, the difference between business entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship? And is there a strict delineation between the two?
Yeah, I have strong feelings about that. We do not differentiate, and I try to stay away from the whole notion of social entrepreneurship. In the end, you still need someone who wants what you're doing and is willing to pay for it. Even a non-for-profit still has to go out and, solicit and have philanthropists and other parties, support their initiatives. And to do that, you have to make a case and have some ideas of the product or service you're delivering. And, so I stay away from that because a lot of our students want to drift that way, and they love to paint the entrepreneur, the business person, the high net worth individual who's made it as somehow nefarious or, ill-gotten gains or something. And I don't want to populate that or push that idea forward. And so I try to disabuse them of that. And one way of doing that is to not allow that distinction. In fact, one of the initiatives we have here is called the WISE Foundation, which is an acronym for What is Social Excellence. And what we try to do is have someone take on that position, and I have them sit in the role of the executive director of a foundation, and I fund them with some seed money. And then they have to go out and identify a problem that they want to solve, and then find the group on campus that is capable of solving it and put out the RFP and, analyze the success of it and get the results and think about how money really travels in the nonprofit areas. And instead of just taking on an activist view, be the one that's actually creating the funding that allows activities to happen. So we try to take those slants on it, and I stay away from just garden variety differentiation between nonprofit and profit. And I think that's important because it can maybe even unwittingly paint entrepreneurship into something that's not adding value to society, when in fact I think it adds a ton of value to society.
That's interesting. I can see. I as somebody who's kind of wrestled with whether the work that I do should be a nonprofit or not, I realized how much work goes into it and how much convincing of people and how much you're still selling to people. You're still trying to get people to buy into your vision. So it's not, just because you have an idea and want to turn it into a nonprofit doesn't mean it's going to be successful. It still needs to follow the same kinds of structures as a business in some ways, I would think.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that I continually harp on is the idea of selling has this, negative connotation. So I try to reframe it and say that, really the highest learning outcome we can have here at college is to create persuasive people who can bring others along to their thoughts and ideas. And and, be a leader who can have followers. And, that's, call it selling or call it persuading. I mean, it's still about idea generation and creating logical, cogent arguments for what course of action and activities we should engage in. And I want to promote that, not push it away.
How about, here's another question for you. In terms of the interdisciplinary kind of work that you do on campus, how are you intersecting with other departments? I know you mentioned the art department and doing, art related kinds of things. Are there other areas that you're kind of having an interdisciplinary approach to, working with other professors and that sort of thing?
Well, I saw you in the chat, you put up Barrington High School, or the Barrington School District. They have an entrepreneurship program at that high school that was funded by the Coleman Foundation, whose money came from Fannie Mae Candy. And they were also a funder at the collegiate level, and Beloit benefited from them as well. But one of their initiatives a while back was the Coleman Fellows. And that was an interesting program where they went to us and had us engage with different departments across campus and have them consider inserting entrepreneurial principles or activities into their classes. So that was one way to build out and have interdisciplinary, intersections between us and different departments. So, for instance, there was a repertory dance company class, but not only did they create a performance, they also thought about how to market it and sell tickets and how to find the venue and how to do the bookkeeping and, take the starving out of artists sort of approach. And that became a very powerful class as a result. In the studio art department, there was a graphic design class that still goes on, where as they learn the principles of graphic design, they do it in the context of the professor having a client come in who outlines a problem and a product or piece that they want designed. And then the students work under those strictures and figuring out how to produce something that is, was going to resonate with the client while they learn how to, use the tools of graphic design. So we've continued to do things like that in the Maker Lab. The chemistry department comes up and uses the 3D printers to print proteins and paint the active bindings, or the statics class comes up and, builds beams and does the math to figure out where they should break and hang weights off them and test them. So it's just almost limitless on how you can, cross over amongst just about any department, frankly.
And Don, part of the discussion that's happened in colleges like Beloit, I think, has been around the value of a liberal arts education. And, it was my belief of my parents that going to a small liberal arts school, was that you were prepared to do anything. And in this world of specialization, where a lot of people are knowing what they're going to major in before they even get to college, there's been a shift towards, I just remember having a conversation with a superintendent here in Illinois about how, the value of training for something specific over something more general. And I think he was missing the point that what we're trying to do is build well-rounded citizens that can participate in a democracy. That's kind of the goal of a liberal arts education. But Beloit has really spent a lot of time, and, I don't know how long, the last 10 years, really kind of thinking about this question of what is the value of a liberal arts education, and producing programs that give students some practical experience. And this is a large part of it, right, Brian? I mean, am I summarizing it somewhat?
Yeah, I mean, the truth be told, a liberal arts education is more relevant and important than ever. I mean, in a world where change is increasing at an increasing rate, you have to skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it is now. I mean, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we broke out some data and looked at 2000 versus 2010, and where they list out all the various occupations and jobs. 70% of the new employment happened in jobs that weren't even didn't even exist in the prior period. So I don't know how you actually train, unless it's a professional degree, to exactly when you don't even know what those jobs or careers are exactly going to be. The idea to have basic, communication, intellectual agility, ability to collaborate, all those types of skills that liberal arts produce is more important than ever, because, you're going to be in an environment in the world, especially if you're working at a higher level, of being charged with finding out what you need to know when you need to know it. So, unless you're a vocational school, I think the leaders are really going to all come from the liberal arts, and they always have, frankly.
I was just shocked by this one superintendent that I talked to. This is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And he felt like it wasn't the value for what liberal arts colleges were charging, and, it wasn't in line with what students were getting. And I think he completely missed the rationale. And, but I think Beloit has done a really good job of articulating in the last few years, what that value is, and how you can make the most of your experience at Beloit, so that you're leaving prepared to do anything, and to go in any direction that you want to. The last question I have for you, and then maybe Don has a few more. Are you seeing other programs like this in other associated colleges in the Midwest or across the country? Are you networking with other entrepreneurial programs? What's the landscape that you see at the higher education level in terms of similar programs?
Colleges are interconnected, across the country, from R1 institutions all the way through small liberal arts colleges like ours. And virtually every college has some sort of version of an innovation, entrepreneurship, courses, majors, schools of entrepreneurship, centers, all those types of things. And there's all sorts of conferences and associations and research papers. I mean, it's a full-blown discipline now. So everyone has it, but the approaches can be very different and widespread. Some of them, like ours, have it be situated in the school as integral and foundational. Others have a nameplate on a vacant office on the third floor of the business school and with a computer in it. So different places do it, more seriously and to a wider audience, but everyone claims to have, some sort of innovation or entrepreneurship. I mean, that's just a buzzword in higher ed now that you have to at least feign interest in it.
And Lucy, in the answer to your question about other high schools doing this, I think the equivalent in high schools was maker spaces. They're everywhere, and then you get the entrepreneurship piece coming in that way. That's where I see it, and so if you look in that maker space, that's where you'll see the entrepreneurship piece.
I just wonder, I don't know. I'm just curious into where you see, I don't know what's the next thing, Brian, for you guys in terms of growing and getting more students involved? And another question I have for you too, that's on the back of my mind, is, are you doing any kind of work with the community in terms of entrepreneurship education for maybe, are you bringing high school students in or anything like that?
We have a program called Project Easy. Easy is entrepreneurship and self-employment for youth. And that's been an outreach program that's been successful and interesting, where we bring kids from impacted neighborhoods, sourced through the State Line Boys and Girls Clubs, in for a workshop. And you find that these kids really know how to hustle and really have some great instincts. And we walk them through an intake and figure out, what they're interested in. One wants to be a veterinarian, for example, and you say, well, you're not going to be a veterinarian by the end of this afternoon. So what can we take from that? And it ends up becoming a dog walking service for the woman who lives 2 doors down, who has to travel on business. And they end up on the whiteboard being able to model out some of their economics, and we put it on videotape, and they've got to present. And, it's just a really rewarding day where these, young middle schoolers can get a taste of creating something, finding a need, figuring out how to monetize it and add value, and maybe even solicit it, whether they're bedazzling, sneakers or having an open gym or something. And, you just find that you can get these concepts through even to young people, and you see the electricity in the room when they start to be able to act on their own ideas and figure out that they might be able to take action on these sort of things. So that's a nice community outreach program that we've done for a number of years, and I always look forward to it.
So you also have a program that I think you told me about, that's just starting with the library at Beloit too. How does that's a community-based program. Is that something, can you explain that a little bit? I don't know the name of it or anything, but I would love to learn more.
Well, we were charged to do some research and write up a white paper and create a toolkit for the Beloit Public Library system that hope to, if the beta test worked, be expanded to other libraries throughout our system. And the idea simply came from the community and the librarians having people come in who were looking for research librarians to help people who were interested in starting businesses. And a lot of these would-be entrepreneurs were coming from impacted neighborhoods and didn't really know where to start. And the librarians didn't feel comfortable giving that kind of advice. And the clients really weren't well versed in the library, and the idea of just going to a section of the library and starting to read all this stuff seemed overwhelming. So, we presented that paper in November to the Wisconsin Library Association, and have it out at the Beloit Public Library right now, where they're trying to figure out ways to take the not these unicorn type companies that are going to be giant companies with hundreds and hundreds of employees, but really the small mom and pop stuff who want to have a side gig but don't know about regulations and how to get through insurance and leasing buildings and all those types of things. How do you kind of have access to resources and think through and start to build some confidence that you can, work your way through this thing and get something off the ground?
I don't know where Don went. I'll have to bring Don back. Anyway, here's my, I guess that's fascinating to me that you have the arms of the center in so many different places. How do you do all this, Brian? I mean, seriously, like this is a lot of work and 20 years of work. How do you do it all? How do you manage this all yourself?
Well, it's funny. I when I first took this and had sold the company and got into the idea of coming out here, I really didn't take it that seriously. I thought, 20 hours a week, you run this little center, you pop in, you pop out. And I never really realized how exciting and fun it would be and how all consuming. So, you just lay out your calendar and you partner with various people and try to build on things you've already had. And, sometimes we look back and are surprised at how much actually happens, but, you just find a way. And I think when we were laughing about Don's questions earlier today, thinking about him, Susan and I, our coordinator, one of the questions was something about, what makes me happiest, or what was something I really thought of as a personal characteristic. And for me, it is just, I think perfection is overrated. So I love just getting after things and not letting perfection get in the way. And, sometimes just getting the work out the door is good enough, and then you can figure it out from there. So, I don't think all our things are fully formed or, something that necessarily would look great if you were trying to have these vanity metrics we talked about, but we we go a long way with a little, and that seems to make a big difference for many students and community members, and it's really fun.
Yeah, Brian, that's so funny because an ex-colleague of mine and a mutual friend of Lucy's used to always say to me, Don, it's good enough. Good enough. It's good enough. Move.
Right.
So I totally resonates with me because I agree with you. Perfection's totally overrated. Totally.
Yeah.
Although I did say to an English teacher once, publish first, edit later. And they were like, and I'd learned it from Tina Selig, who's a professor at Stanford, and she said that, and I thought, oh my God, of course, yeah, it makes sense. The English teacher was not happy with the publish first, edit later, but anyway, right. I am definitely a publish first, edit later guy.
Yeah, that's funny.
So hey, Brian, haven't talked about partnerships, and we only have a few minutes left, but there might be some people in the audience who might want to reach out to you in some way, down the road. We have Matt Nink just checked in on LinkedIn, who is a Milwaukee person. He works for Sky Schools and used to teach it at University School. So Matt, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. But my question for you, Brian, is partnerships. How do you know a good partnership when you see it? And how do you go about finding partners? Is it organic, or how does it work?
A lot of it's organic, and a lot of it's just need-based. Finding the right partner when we're trying to solve a particular problem. So I don't brood over it a lot, but they do seem to bubble up and find their natural level. But I've always found myself to be opportunistic and have a good nose for quality or value. So that's what we do. I mean, we just partnered with a group that has a national television series called Make 48 that has their competitions in large cities, and I was able to meet one of their sales development people, and one thing led to another, and Beloit is going to be in the national competition in Kansas City in the spring as a result. So I don't know, we're very opportunistic, and we kind of don't get too overwrought with structure and programming. We just keep moving.
Don, do you have one last question you want to ask Brian before we wrap it up?
No, it's great. Brian, thanks for coming in, and what you're doing is awesome. I know these spaces, and I just think this is not even the future. This is the now. And if we could get something at the high school level like this, I mean, and I'm trying to build this type of program, but it's not in a public school world, which means it doesn't reach very many people. But I love that idea, and I've been to many innovation centers, and some of my students have gone on and brought their products or whatever it is to this, and we're able to work in it. And I was been in the one in it's in Upper Manhattan. Why am I out? Fordham University and has an innovation center, and just to see that and see the students in there and the mentoring and one of my students ended up in that, and it's just great. So I know the sort of space, even though I haven't seen it. And yeah, that's awesome. But thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, and congratulations on all you're doing. And thanks for posting the website address for anyone on with us or viewing it in the future. I'm happy to collaborate, and my information is all there if somebody wants to check it out. I know Amy says in the chat, Project Easy, the youth program was entrepreneurship and self-employment for youth. That's what that stood for. And, I'd appreciate any feedback. And if people want to learn more, happy to engage, and appreciate you having me come on.
I think another thing I will add too is if anybody's ever up in Beloit, and I know we have some Chicago area people here. Amy is based here in Chicago. Stop by and see the space, because I think that's what brings it home is touring it. I had the chance. I happened to be up there in Beloit for a funeral, and Brian was at the funeral, and of a much beloved professor of mine. And I would never have gone. I would have never known about CELEB. I would have never known had I not run into you and you gave us that tour. So And also Beloit has this amazing building too, speaking of architecture, called the Powerhouse, that was redeveloped from a powerhouse by Jeannie Gang in Chicago. So if you have not seen that too, that's amazing as well. I think Beloit is doing some pretty exciting stuff. So,
Yeah, it's an
and I'm a
easy shot
little
too. I mean,
biased.
it's right on the interstate. So if you're heading up to the Twin Cities or Madison, coming through from Chicago, I mean, we're literally right off the interstate and 5 minutes into the town. So that's a sincere invitation for anybody who wants to swing in. I'd be delighted to show anybody around.
That's awesome. Thanks again, Brian. I'm going to throw up my slides and wrap up really quickly here. Thank you, Brian, for coming and spending time with us today. We really appreciate it. Here's his information. If anybody missed it, you can connect him on LinkedIn or Twitter. And Beloit.edu/CELEB is the website for this entrepreneurial endeavor. Our next conversation is going to be next Friday with Aaron Shorn from Unruler, which is a startup based out of Hawaii that has it's a student learning a tool for documenting student learning. And Aaron is really interesting. He has a fascinating background, and he'll be a great person for everyone to know as well. So feel free to register for next week or just drop in on whatever platform you enjoy, and we'll have another conversation on February 3rd. Once again, you can join our community and look at our materials if you go to Linktree/Actionable Inno. And I think that's it for now, other than this survey that we're trying to do to see what people want in terms of other professional learning events. So if you have a chance, we'd love for you to take that survey as well. So without further ado, I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks again for coming. I appreciate it. Thanks, Don, for being here, and we'll see you all next week.